Welcome to Planning Phase Syndicate Set 2 Deck Tech, where we decided we were going to play around with some of the new Set 2 decks and build something we felt passionate about that could be a staple in the meta. Tonight, we're going to be covering a Qi'ra Command deck. This is our first pass at it. We've been testing around with some of the other decks. This one we found has been like a great replacement for Krennic with a little bit more energy than Krennic brings to the table. So we thought, hey, why not actually just go ahead and build a deck, look at it, talk about it, and then, you know what, we'll be able to come back to it and see what it does later on in the future. Joining me tonight on the mic is my good friend, JJ. So we decided we wanted to start off with Qira as the leader of choice, and some of it's a little bit of selfishness in the testing, right? Like, this is kind of what we've been testing around. But on the opposite side, the other thing that we wanted to do is to say, you know, what are some good replacements for some of these other leaders that possibly have even bigger potential than what we're already seeing? Qira's that leader. We feel Qira's that leader at least. As you know, I'm more of a control player than an aggro player currently. That could change if we get Ewoks. So hopefully we get some Ewoks on the set. But I wanted to go through this deck because I felt this deck is pretty strong. Just coming out of the gate, it's utilizing a lot of new cards, some old staples, and I really just kind of wanted to break it down and talk a little bit about, you know, how this deck works, what to expect from it, and is it going to be something that you can utilize going forward in constructed play. So JJ, why don't you go ahead and you don't have to run the sideboard down. We'll do a sideboard discussion towards the end, but if you want to go ahead and just quickly run down what are the cards that we have in this deck.
All right, yeah. So for this deck here, we got 3 copies of the Hylobon Enforcer. We got 3 copies of the Incinerator Trooper, 3 copies of Pike Sentinel, 3 copies of Seasoned Shore Trooper, 3 copies of Death Trooper, 3 copies of Embo, Stoic and Resolute, the new card that we just revealed this last Sunday. We got 3 copies of the Phase 3 Dark Trooper, 3 Super Laser Technicians, 3 Lom Pike and Dealer in Truce, 3 Maul Shadow Collective Visionary, 3 Reinforcement Walkers, 3 Constorium Star Vipers, 3 First Light Headquarters on Crimson Dawn. And then in the events, we got 3 Power the Dark Side, 2 Takedowns, 3 Overwhelming Barrages, 2 Rivals Fall, 1 Super Laser Blast, and then 3 top targets to round off the list.
Awesome. Now, the one thing I want to note, there's a couple things I want to note, is if you ignore the sideboard for now, the sideboard is kind of a working construction, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. But the idea here behind the way that the reason I wanted to build something of this deck is because we talk about, especially on the show, is like, how do you get decks that can be friendly to newer players, right? So if you're just joining the game, every copy except for the 1 copy of Super Laser Blast is something that you can get for less than $10 easily on the market right now, if not even cheaper. So the idea also behind this deck is how can I give you a deck that is powerful, that will do things, and it's not something that you have to worry about going back and collecting all of set 1. And so that's why we really wanted to introduce this deck to everybody.
Yeah, I also do want to note that this actually this is a 53 card deck that we have on here. So normally, you know, the base minimum that you can have in a single deck is 50. So any particular reason you decided to add on those extra 3 cards there?
Yeah, so we've been playing around a little bit, JJ, with deck size, right? And when you start adding cards, it becomes a little bit more inconsistent. What we felt is that for the most part, the deck with the 53 cards has felt okay, and it's because we want to add those bounties in for the healing. Are they necessary? No. Could you pull Seasoned Shore Trooper out? Absolutely. But the idea behind it was how do we keep our cost curve down? Adding those 3 cards gives us a cost curve that we're able to actually be able to utilize, hopefully not turn 1, but we are able to utilize them as ways to kind of buff and build out the board. And so the idea behind it is we've been playing around with increasing a little bit of the deck size without losing consistency. So this deck does not lose the consistency, especially because there's a couple of smuggle cards that we'll talk about in a few minutes. And the idea behind it is giving you more options, which I feel is going to be something that the reason when they built this game, the reason they say 50 card minimum is because some decks are going to be able to work with larger pool sizes. We were only brave enough to do 3. So we'll go from there and kind of see how that works.
Okay.
So let's start off and JG. So tell us what Kira's leader side is, and then tell us what Kira's flip side when she comes out as an actual ground unit.
So her leader side is action. You spend a resource. You deal 2 damage to a friendly unit, then give a shield token to that unit. And then when she flips, she has 8 health, no attack, but she comes with grit. And she reads, when deployed, heal all damage from each unit, then deal damage to each unit equal to half its remaining HP rounded down. So if you happen to play this on a round that you have a lot of units out there that have kind of like spread out damage, Qira can absolutely do a lot of good, devastating damage when she's deployed immediately there. So there is a bit of timing that you have to use in order to really effectively use Qira when you deploy her.
Yes, and the idea, the way that this deck works, and this is a theory that we have, is that some of the leaders are not designed to hit the table and be there forever. If we talk about, and the example that we normally would use, right, is Iden. Iden is not meant there. Iden's big thing is she gets heal 1 around when she's not active. When she's on the table, she heals every time something dies. Typically with Iden, you don't build up a huge board state where you're killing a bunch of things all the time unless you're super laser blasting, right? But Iden has that ability, comes in with the shield. But what Iden doesn't do is any sort of damage. So Iden essentially can swing twice and take out a unit that has 4 or less health, which is great. And so this is kind of the same theory, is that her leader side is actually super, super important compared to her unit side. And we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to, like, we're going to go through turn by turn. We'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward, right? So the big thing here is Qira does damage and shields a unit. So we talk about strategy. You want to build grit pieces in there, right? Qira is able to come in, do the damage, and then give a shield. So again, for example, and we do not have the Scout Bike in this deck right now. That is also an option that could go in there, though the Scout Bike costs 2 versus the Habalon that costs us 1, right? The difference is you don't get the effect of the bounty, but again, we'll talk about pros and cons in a minute. The big thing here, though, is when Qira is able to, you could play that, spend a resource, deal the 2 damage, it immediately gets a grit, and then it puts a shield on it. So you know what it's susceptible to? Well, events like, make an opening, different things like that, where you have events that are killing them off, but not like an open fire type event. Something that deals just damage and doesn't bypass shields, this deck helps with. So when we talk a lot about the strategy, her ability is just, it's just, in my opinion, is insane. And when as we've been testing, and we'll talk about our turn 1 stuff here in a minute, but as we've been testing, Qira's able to essentially, you could spend a unit for 2, give them grit, and then immediately give them a shield. Sometimes you can even do it for your sentinels, where you're just giving it a shield to say, hey, the sentinel is going to live longer. So, I'm sorry, Sabine, you don't have a saboteur, and you're going to swing in with for 4. Well, I've already got a shield. I'm going to swing in with grit back and probably kill your unit. So it works very well in that aspect. The other cool thing about her is when she flips, she does damage. So if your units have shields, the damage just hits that shield. If your units don't have shields, it adds grit to the ones that get grit. It puts them at half, and then it also puts every other unit on the board at half. Everybody's at half, so that she immediately comes out as a 4/4, the same power as I did. Now, what you're going to tell me is, well, Chris, a 5-cost leader at 4/4, that just doesn't sound very good. Well, the idea here is Qira is so versatile, she has the ability to come out and take your leader off of the board because she's doing 4 damage to it, and then she can just swing in. So it's a literally can be an 8 to 12, damage swing, depending on if she takes damage from something else, yada, yada, yada. So there's a million different things you can do with her, and we'll talk a lot about that here upcoming in a few minutes. The other idea here is you could also ramp really hard and then bring out First Light, which we'll talk about is the ship that everybody should be running in blue decks. And you could take First Light out, and that does damage. She comes out and does damage, and now everybody's got damage on them, and they all got grit because First Light's ability essentially lets ships or units with damage on them have a fake grit until it goes away. So you have to kill that ship. You have no idea. You have no choice. Otherwise, you've got all these units swinging in for more. And think about a phase trooper, right? If you swing into a phase trooper, it's now got grit on it. Let's say it's got 1 damage on it out of 3. If you can't do that other 2 damage, it now gets shields. Or not shields, experience tokens, right? And it's now just buffing itself. So Qira's flip churn is very versatile, and that's why this leader is very good at being able to help control and stabilize your game. Other pieces that you're looking for, right, is what can you smuggle? What can you do to build up? You want to ramp a little bit. Sometimes you just want to clear boards. But your in plays are your first light and your reinforcement walkers. Those things allow you to heal because the reinforcement walker, when played and when activated, heals 3 damage, or you get to draw a card. So if you don't need to heal, you're just drawing cards and you're just like, Merry Christmas. Once you start putting damage on it with that first light out, now that thing just swings in. So now they have 2 units. If they kill the first light with whatever card they have, then now you have a reinforcement walker that's going to live 2 turns longer. So there's a lot going on with this deck specifically. And so why don't we get into, JJ, our turn 1 plays.
All right.
So JJ, what is the 3? I brought 3 cards. These are essentially in your opening hand. These are what you need for turn 1 play. So tell us what are the 3 cards we see on the screen?
Sure. The first one that we have here is the High-Low Bond Enforcer that comes in with 1 attack and 4 health. Comes with grit and comes with bounty. Draw a card. And then the next one is the Incinerator Trooper that allows you to deal its combat damage first before the defender, coming in with 2 attack and 2 health. And then the last one that we have here is the 2-cost Pike Sentinel that has Sentinel ability on it with 2 attack and 3 health. Definitely really, really good, nice and cheap Sentinel unit to include in this particular one here. And the best part about Hydromon Enforcer and Pike Sentinel is that they pair very, very well with Maul, which we'll discuss later.
Yep. And so when you're looking at your turn 1 play, and again, all of this hinges on what you're playing against, right? Like if you're playing against a control deck, you don't have to have some of these specific characters out, right? Because the control deck's going to be able to take it off the board most of the time. Power of the Dark Side. If you're playing against a hero one, you're not getting Power of the Dark Side, but they have other tools in their tech. So you have to think about what you're playing. But for the most part, one of the best plays is to be able to play that Hyblan Enforcer, because it comes out at 1. Qira can go ahead and do 2 damage to it and give it a shield for your second resource. And now you have a unit that's on the board that has this. If you're playing against a control deck, you can mulligan and try to get 2 of these things out to begin with, because then the Power of the Dark Side only affects 1 of them. You can then shield, you can then put down a grid, and you can attack with it. The idea with this deck is you're going to control the board and make things feel like they're in your opponent's favor to some extent, but mainly you just need to control it till you can get to Qira's flip churn so you can stabilize, and then till you can get to your resources to be able to bring out your reinforcement walker. The reason Incendiary Trooper would be chosen, if you get that instead, let's say you don't get an Enforcer, you can get one of those, is it's a mini Han. That's what that thing is. So yeah. Turn 1, how many times turn 1 is anybody playing something that can do 3 damage? It's not all the time. It does happen. We are seeing this set. It comes up. This card may be one of those that we cut and throw something else in here. But to begin with, this card is extremely good because while you can't shield it with Qira, you can use it to be able to be like a mini Han and take something else out. This is, again, a card that we've talked about depending on the metas. If the meta shifts towards very high damage output turn 1 and 2 plays, this might not be a card that we keep long term. But it has done a lot of damage because, again, you can attack with something else, bring that out turn 2, then you can swing with it turn 3. It lives because you're using your other units to kill. And then, of course, the Pike Sentinel is, hey, I got a Sentinel on turn 1. And because really, the only thing that can kill that without going through its shields is Power of the Dark Side, right? At 3 costs. Right now, 3 costs, you got Power of the Dark Side. You have Make an Opening. So if you're not playing against something that runs those cards that can avoid shields, or something that's got Saboteur, you could do your 2 damage to this thing and give it a shield. And now it's still only going to attack for 2, but now it's got a Sentinel out, and now you're going to make people swing into it a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. And in having these cards out early, it just helps you set up your turn two play for some of your other cards that you have in your deck here. So it these three are definitely really good to start off right off the bat, to make sure that you have at least one copy of each in your starting hand, or at least two of these in your starting hand to start off the round.
So now if we want to talk about turn two plays, right? Turn two plays are something where you could have a Sentinel, you might not have a Sentinel. Again, this is a very versatile style deck. A lot of what we're looking for is you can play like a Power of the Dark Side. Especially if you're able to go first, so you're playing against a Sabine deck. If you had initiative last turn, played your card, able to shield your card, and you get to go first, I mean, you're just like, it's in Gold City here, because you could play a Power of the Dark Side and just wipe out whatever you want, right? Death Trooper is a very versatile one, and let me explain to you how this works. So let's say you have they have a unit down there, and you have your Enforcer out, right? Or you have your Incinerate Trooper. You could put a Death Trooper down. It then does the 2 damage. You do it 2 damage back to the Death Trooper, and then your Incinerator Trooper could just kill it and not take any damage. Pretty good. You could also, if they haven't swung, let's say they haven't swung where they're playing space or whatever, you can then turn around and use your Death Trooper to kill the shield on your Helibon Enforcer, then turn around and put the 2 damage back onto another one of their ground units, and then you can go ahead and do 2 damage to your Death Trooper and shield it. It's crazy. You can shield that card if you have other cards out. Phase 3, Dark Trooper is probably the best play, in fairness, because it's a Sentinel that if you cannot kill the stupid thing, it just continues to get bigger.
Wow, yeah. And now, question for you now, when you're going from turn 1 to turn 2, are you looking to grab the initiative, or are you okay being flexible either way?
The ability to be flexible is mandatory with this deck. This deck does not have to go first. It's all in if you want to kill something. So for example, if it's a Sabine deck and they've got a unit down and they went first, they play their unit, you play your unit, they do their 1 ping damage, and you have a Power of the Dark Side, you absolutely just take initiative and kill it with the Power of the Dark Side. Same way as if you have you play one of your turn 1 plays, it's again a Sabine deck, and it's, or a Kylo deck, right? And what you don't want is to be able to take all that damage back. You can forego the shield the first time, because Qira's thing is not about, specifically units, right? That you have to play that unit. It's not like, oh, this action is let me play this unit, and that's how I give it. It's just deal damage to a friendly unit, then give it a shield. So it's not like Luke. Luke, you have to play the unit, right? You don't have to play this unit to get it to work. So there you go, JJ. The answer is it's flexible, but you do want that. You want the initiative if you want to be able to wipe them out right away. But if they're playing like 2 or 3 units on turn, or 2 units on turn 1, you might not be able to. You might need to be able to put that shield on there so that way you have a better probability of taking out some of their units.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that turn 2, just helping to control, to make sure that you're taking out, key units that can help disrupt your units there. I mean, there's not much you can do in terms of like, events or tricks that can, mess up the flow of or the tempo of your side there. But, having, especially if you have an Incinerator Trooper, turn 1, being able to target those units that you can take out immediately, and then allowing Death Trooper to come in and finish off, or deal other damages to other units that have more health, to at least set that up, is very key. That helps you control your side of the board on the ground. Definitely.
Absolutely. So now if we move on to turn 3 plays, right? This is where it gets a little bit more dicey. If their leader deploys at 4 resources, your best play is that Super Laser Tech. If you have it in your hand, you then, and this is hilarious, because Qira can then spend that 4th resource, kill Super Laser Tech, give it a shield, which means nothing because it's dead, and then it goes into your resource pile ready. If you have a top target in hand, you've now all of a sudden, got a resource for that. You have a resource to give a shield to something else if there is something else still alive. There's just so much versatility here. But the best thing is that Qira can come out on your turn 3 to kill their leader in the same turn. And I'll repeat that again. Qira can come out and kill their leaders turn 3. And you may lose Qira. Qira may just go right back into the thing, but you do not care, because think about a Sabine leader that all of a sudden has the ability to get Medal of Ceremony, right? That's not good. You don't want that. You don't want this a 3/6 that does extra damage to a base. You don't want any of that. So you want to be able to bring her out to kill her off, and she does that 4 damage immediately. Then if you have something in hand like a you could swing with her. Sorry, not something in hand, but you can swing with her. You can do a whole bunch of other stuff. So if you have a leader, your opponent does, that comes out on turn 4, that is one of the best plays. If you're playing against like slower leaders, right? Control your board. It's the same way as we've been playing blue and green. Use your units, take out their units. Don't worry about doing a bunch of damage to the base. Trust me, that will come. and when I say that will come, that really will come very quickly. And it allows you to use some of your tech to be able to kill them out. It's also, depending if you don't get a super laser tech and you can't flip Qira, you might have to eat that damage for a turn, right? But that's where Embo comes in. That's where a Star Viper comes in. That's where a Lon Pike comes in. Like, a Embo is essentially, you could play it, give it an upgrade, give it a shield, and then, oh, by the way, now all of a sudden you have a unit that, if it kills things, can heal damage from other units. Yeah, that's pretty good, especially when Qira flips and you need to use it to heal. And the Star Viper, for now, unless we feel differently, for now the Star Viper stays in there. Again, we'll talk about sideboard in a few minutes, but that specifically, that actual Star Viper, you could play that, not be able to flip, and you just take a control, let them do their thing, and that Star Viper all of a sudden heals next turn. It heals. And you could do your Qira stuff and give it a shield too if you want. So there's just so much versatility in this set. In this play, and you have to know what your opponent's trying to do.
Yeah. Now, if you're facing a leader that comes in much later, right? Let's say you're playing against a Darth Vader, right? That comes in on turn 6. Are you holding on to Qira until Vader shows up?
That's a good question. The answer is depending on board state. If they are able to build a decent board state, you bring Qira out. That's what you do. If they, and again, we'll talk about this in a minute when we hit our turn 4 and turn through 6, right? I hold Qira as long as I need to hold Qira. If their leaders aren't coming out till later, don't just hold her just to kill their leader. That's not worth it, right? Like a Vader that comes out, it can be a very bad Vader. If they bring in, start adding lightsabers to this thing, then your Qira is not killing that Vader. But by that turn, you should have your Rival's Fall, right? You have a Rival's Fall you can use. You have Overwhelming Barrage, all sorts of different tools. So do not feel like you have to bring Qira out. Qira is designed to control your board state for you and help you restabilize into that turn. So if you're playing a late in life leader and you've got a super laser tech, you don't even have to kill it. You can play it, still have your other resource for something else, and then you don't have to kill that one off. You can go to your next turn and actually use it to swing in. So there's a lot of different options there. All right, so JJ's leading us into what is your turn 4 and turn 6 look like, right? So JJ, you see all these cards, and then you see everything on the edge, and right, the idea is what do these cards lead to, and how do I get to my big unit? So what are some of the cards that you're seeing that are capable for your turn 4 through 6 plays?
Well, the first one that we see here is definitely Top Threat. It's that bounty that you can apply to some of your enemy units out there to help you ramp up and get more resources. In addition to that, we also have the presence of the Super Laser Technicians, which, as you know, once they die, they turn to resources there for you. And then you have Rival's Fall that allows you to exert a unit. And that allows you to help control the board presence a little bit more there. And then lastly, the last one that we have on there is the Overwhelming Barrage. That's just such a great utility card there. That's such a great way to help control the tempo of the game there, allowing you to give yourself more time to get some of your larger ones out there by giving them a 2/2. Makes them a little harder to kill, especially if you already have the shield with Qira on there, just making them that much bigger of an attack. Now, this also works on Qira herself as well, especially if she's already gridded with some damage on there. That helps her to stay on the board longer and be a pretty big presence herself to deal some consecutive attacks if your opponent fails to take her out quickly, or just taking a long time to take her out, especially if you already have Sentinel units out there on the board. This helps you set up for some of the larger cards in the deck, namely Maul, for instance, which pairs very, very well with some of the underworld cards that are in the deck already. And then the other one that we have on here is a Reinforcement Walker, which is an 8 cost there that can do some massive damage. And the other one that we spoke of already, the First Light, which is a 7 cost there, that is such a great card to have, especially with Grit. It's a really strong card.
Yeah, so essentially, like, now you're into like toolbox mode. Now you have to control the board. So JJ, earlier you said, hey, when do we sometimes flip Qira before we hit Vader? Well, if they've got, let's say, 4 to 5 units down and they're just starting to do all sorts of damage, top target, overwhelming barrage on one of your people, then all of a sudden you're gonna flip Qira, do half damage to everything. So if you have a unit that's like almost dead, it goes to half. It doesn't kill it, it just goes to half. And now all of a sudden I've got this overwhelming barrage play. And so Qira is a mini overwhelming barrage, right? So you can flip Qira, do your Qira damage, and then throw overwhelming barrage, and you just wipe some of the board off. You just start wiping that board down. And the way it works with Qira, like you said, is once she's got damage, she's already going to come in with 4 damage, right? So she's now a 4/4 that all of a sudden has 2 more on top of it. So now she's a 6, so she's doing 6 damage on top of all of the other things she wipes. So anything that has like 1, 2, 3 health left, boom, 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 you just start picking them off here and there. And then don't be afraid of that Rival's Fall, obviously, right? Like that's your insurance. So if they're playing stuff and you are worried about their leader flipping later, you can hold your Rival's Fall. I mean, how many Vader decks are going to hold a card that discards cards out of your hand? Probably not many. No, there is some cards coming, I think, in red that will do some of those things. So we'll see how it works. Forced surrender might be a bigger thing.
Yeah.
Going forward in the future. But your goal is how do I take my stabilization with my Qira and continue to move into setting up my end game? My end game is Maul, Reinforcement Walker, and First Light for the majority of this deck. And here's the key. First Light does not have to actually come out on 7 resources. You can smuggle it.
Yeah.
Then it's only a 9. So you don't have to worry about like somebody discarding that card. There's only 1 card in this game right now. Only 1 card, maybe 2. Nope, 1 card. There's only 1 card in this game that takes smuggle cards and makes you get rid of them. And it's a random chance. So that's kind of what you're looking for when you're looking towards how do I build towards my end game. Now we have our end game, right? Our end game's Maul, our end game's Reinforcement Walker, our end game's First Light. And First Light, like I said, First Light is just such a good card. And because it's in your smuggle, your opponent doesn't know it's there. It can come out and do all sorts of crazy things and then still give grit to everything. So the biggest thing is First Light can come out, do its damage to something that automatically activates grit, and then Qira can Qira can then use her ability and shield something too. So here's your Reinforcement Walker. Yeah, okay, I'm going to put 4 damage on it. I'm going to then put another 2 damage on it. So now it's down to 3 health, but now I've got a shield, and folks, I'm swinging for 12, and I'm going to heal 3 or draw a card. And if you draw a top target, I'm going to throw a top target out. Maul, on the opposite side, Maul is so versatile. Maul can come out and he does his damage to an underworld, and it doesn't say it bypass shields, right? So he could come out, and he can do his damage and hit it all on the shield. And now you've got a small unit that's still there alive, and you've got Maul swinging in with no damage on him. And then if you want to, and we've done this, after Maul swings and does his ambush attack, which has overwhelm, you could then do your 2 damage to him and shield him. And okay, so who do you want to take care of? Do you want to kill a shielded Maul, or do you want to kill a First Light? The First Light's the obvious answer, right? You got to get that thing off the board.
Yeah, especially if there's nothing on the space side there. I mean, you could essentially, if you decide to smuggle it and your opponent has not much of a space presence there, you can essentially deal the damage to itself, making this an 8/3, and that's going right into your opponent's space, especially if they don't have enough space units or like any sentinel units on their end to help stop that big punch that comes in from First Light. So. That's definitely a very, very big advantage there.
Yeah. The other thing is Maul comes out, Maul gets the grit. This is your end game. Maul being able to be on the board at the same time First Light, and even maybe your reinforcement walker is just so outstanding that people don't know what to do. They have to use like a rival's fall against one of these units. They have to. Like, they cannot let these units stay on the board. They just cannot. And so our end game is this. That's what our end game is. Being able to come out 7 resources as a smuggle from First Light, like D4 damage doesn't mean anything. Because you could just kill you could kill another smaller unit too. So if you have a unit that's got 1 health left that's already swung for the turn, First Light could come out and just kill that thing if that's what you want. And you don't, then nobody's really taking damage. Everybody's just there. So there's just so much versatility here. It's not even funny. Now let's talk a little bit about strengths and weaknesses, right? Because there's definitely some strengths and weaknesses to this deck, right? So JJ, what are the weaknesses? What do you see that is weaknesses for this specific deck?
Well, definitely hard control. With milling options, that stops this deck. It stops the flow of the cards that you need when you need them. Obviously, as we were going through the first round and second round, if you're unable to get those cards out, or they come out at the wrong time, then it's not going to set your play up for success for this particular deck. So that's definitely something that can really mess up the flow of your game, or if they manage to make your end game pieces get discarded, for instance, like your Maul or your First Light, if those end up getting tossed out due to like discard effects, and you don't have another replacement that's viable or comes out when you need it, that can help you, that can mess up your end game there and pushing that extra damage at the end there. The next stop there is decks that produce a lot of shields, so make it harder to push damage. If you look at some of the Luke Blue decks that help like generate a lot of shields, that definitely can be very tough. It's particularly since this particular deck doesn't have much Saboteur that can help bypass those shields there. So that can be a little bit of a struggle for this deck in order for it to push damage reliably on there. And then lastly, any deck that can do 1 damage to ping your shields and stop momentum. Cards that do free damage whenever they attack. Cards right off the top of my head is like Fifth Brother with a lightsaber that can deal damage to the side, or Vader when he attacks can do damage to the side, or Palpatine, for instance, when he comes out, can deal 1 damage to different units all at the same time. Those are different units that can help disrupt the flow of your particular deck there, and you got to be mindful of those potentials when you're facing other decks.
Yeah. On the opposite side, you have a very versatile deck. You have a deck that grit equals extra damage. You're able to do late game damage and larger swings of that damage. You're getting shields once per round for your vulnerable units. Resource cards are just such a, being able to use that smuggle mechanic is just so amazing. And the cards that you need, the Lam, which we didn't even touch on a lot of. Lam is a decent card of the deck because it's giving the shield to something and it's getting the shield. And it's not as imperative because you could shield something that you don't really care about and you kill everything else, and then you got another thing that's shielded, or you didn't even have to use that mechanic, right? And so it's just so versatile to be able to smuggle those things out. and we are 60 cards away from the end deck. Maybe we're going to get a few more smuggle cards that'll fit into this, but we don't know for sure right yet. Qi'ra is so versatile. She's a toolbox. This is like her. This is the building blocks for this leader, and her basically being able to say, well, I could move inside of my lanes and move different lanes very easily is such an amazing ability that, like, just hands down, that leader itself makes it so crazy. She's got also, there's a couple of like what I would call like quirky things that she can do. One of them is if their leader doesn't want to come out, you can pass. You can do your churn and then just pass, because you know when you flip Qi'ra, you're able to do the damage, then Qi'ra can go and take out your leader. So, for example, if they have no Sentinel, do they want to flip Luke? Do they not want to flip Luke? And you can just say pass, pass, and oh no, you lost a few resources maybe, or all of these other things. They don't want Qi'ra to come out if they know what Kira's going to do. If they know Kira's going to come out, deal half damage, and then on top of that, be able to swing in and kill them. Like right now, Pelp is the only leader that does not suffer from that. And so that's the big thing is you can be cheeky, I guess, with it and just say, I'm going to hold her and I'm not going to do anything. The other weird cheeky thing you could do is you could hold Qi'ra till first light comes out, and then you deal your damage, and everybody's got grit now. Like everybody's just got grit. So like all of a sudden she comes out, does all this damage to each unit, and by the way, they're going to all swing in with grit. So it doesn't matter which one you kill. They've all got grit. So, which is, like I said, grit is a great mechanic that we didn't think was going to be super popular, I don't think. And now look at it. It's just like off the charts, hands down, amazing.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, so now we're going to kind of move on, and we move on to like what is a mulligan in an opening hand look like, right? You know, like these are the cards that you have that you really want to play around with in your opening hand. The first thing I'm going to tell you is if you get Forlom and First Light and you have the rest of your hand is decent, just resource those. It's not even a question. You don't even have to think about it. You just go, oh, boom, oop, boom. Just put them down. They're going to come back later. You're going to be able to use them so much more often. Just resource them. If you have,
and just to be clear, it's Lam, not Forlom, but yeah.
So if you get Lam and First Light, just go ahead, just resource them. They're going to be amazing when they come out later. The other thing is right, if you get, you're going to want at least one of these churn 1 and churn 2 plays. So you're going to want an Incendiary Trooper. You're going to want a Pike Sentinel. You're going to want a Dark Phase Trooper. You're definitely going to want a Hoblon Enforcer. That is not mandatory, but like a really great churn 1 play. Just boom, out of the gate. Love that thing. And then also you want some sort of control, whether it's Overwhelming Barrage, Power of the Dark Side, Embo, you Super Laser Tech. Like if you're getting somewhat like a mix of these cards, you don't need to mulligan. Just keep this. That is a great hand. Now, one of the things people ask, well, what if I get a Reinforcement Walker or a Maul? The first question I would ask is, do you have the other two things to resource, and can you hold on to Maul as a dead card? I will tell you, Maul is a dead card, especially if you got a little bit of ramp. Maul is an amazing dead card to hold on to, because if you can ramp a little bit, you have a little bit less control. But once you move into that turn 6, or turn 5 to 6, when you're able to play Maul, when Maul comes out, Maul's just giving everybody middle fingers. That's what Maul's doing. A Reinforcement Walker, I wouldn't mulligan just for that if you have the rest of the good hand, but Reinforcement Walkers are definitely something you really don't care to see in your opening hand, and that's something that you kind of want to avoid if you absolutely can. All right, so then the last is, let's go back and why don't we look a little bit at our sideboard. Our sideboard contains 1 restock, 1 entrenched, 2 of the Black Sun Enforcers, 2 of the Fell's Dragon, 2 Dooku, and 2 Snoke. So the reason I have these in here, right, is the restock is for if we are going to have like really popular, what you would call really popular decks that allow for more tricky stuff, right? Like where they're going to be milling us, we need a restock. We may even need 2 restocks. We don't know if Blue Iden is going to be big. We don't know if they're going to somebody's going to make a Blue Qi'ra. Maybe I'll make a blue Kira, actually. We don't know, right? And same with Entrench. Entrench is not super great in this deck, and I'll be honest with you, I threw it in there really more or less for like anti-Boba tech. But I don't care as much about it, and I'll be honest, I probably would drop that other Entrench and put 2 restocks in there, and that's probably the smarter place to go with it, because the restocks are going to be more important, because you're looking to kill units with this deck, and once you give something entrenched, it's really hard to do it. Now, I won't lie and tell you entrench you can entrench a Kira, you can entrench one of your own units at the beginning of the game, and it really helps. So, for example, if you're playing against an aggro deck, entrench can help you because you're not looking to do damage towards base to begin with. You can put this on one of your phase troopers, you can put this on something else that can't just wipe it off the board, and now you're doing the 2 damage and shielding it, 2 damage and shielding it, and now you've got like an entrenched shield every round. It could get crazy. The Black Suns are there for Sentinel for space. Really, your overwhelming barrage is what you're dealing with space with. There is a conversation where we might, if space becomes super popular, this deck might suffer to space units, and we'll have to change up our sideboard for it based on that. But as of what we've seen, that's not been a thing. Obviously the Fell the Dragon is there for anything that has 5 or more, damage. So if you have something that can ramp really quick, or that is a control deck that's going to ramp later in the game, that card's an immediate side in to say, hey, guess what? We're going to murder things because I'm sorry, like you should stop putting stuff on the board. And then the question becomes is, do you replace Dooku with some more space units? That's a good argument to play. Dooku's really good because Dooku does the same thing. He comes in and kills something, and then he's shielded. And so then, he can come in, do his thing, swing the next turn. She can give him 2 damage, re-shield him a second time. So he's killed 2 units by the time you even get to the other turn. So if they haven't taken care of him, he's just there really to be a bully. And Snoke is the new ad that we've decided that we wanted to add in there, which actually will make this deck cost a lot more. So Snoke is like, for a budget stuff, ignore the Snoke piece and go some other route. But really, Snoke can come in as well and kind of be a substitute bully for Maul, right? So like if you need more heavier units late game, that's when you start bringing the Snoke in, because now it's giving less damage and your units are just coming out and swinging just off the charts hardcore. So that is our Set 2 Kira deck analysis. Thank you all so much for joining. Happy trails, and hope to see you play this deck and win some tournaments with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And catch you on the next one.
Yep.